Okay, what is up my friends, Billy here. I hope you are all doing well. Just wanted to make a quick video because I've got some things on my mind about pedals and specifically my delay and reverb units. So it's been quite fun making the past couple of videos about the Vox Pathfinder 10. It's still a mouthful to say. The second video was about using the pedals, running through them, seeing how the amp reacts to them and if it works well. And my pedal board I had not used in quite a long time, and the pedals were quite dusty, but I'm quite excited because I've dusted them off and I've started using them again. But using them got me thinking that we're living in an age where a lot of amp simulations, you know, as plugins and also units like the Helix, the Cortex, what other ones, Fractal Audio, Kemper, units like that actually do a lot of the work that these separate pedals do. In my mind I was like, well, are they still worth investing in? Is buying like an Eventide TimeFactor worth it when you can buy, well, spend a little bit more money and buy a unit that gives you amp simulations, reverbs, delays, modulations and all that stuff. So with that in mind, I was thinking, well, what else can I do with these guitar pedals that I've got sitting around in the studio that is non-guitar related? And the first thing that came to mind is that, well, I'm also a mix engineer for anybody who didn't know. I've got some projects that I've mixed, they're all up on the website. I'll make sure to link stuff in the description and around here. But I do all of my work in the box. So all my effects, all my processing is done within the DAW, and I don't have any outboard gear. And I was thinking, well, these are expensive and very powerful delay and reverb pedals, right? So I was thinking, well, what is a way to set them up where I can actually have them as outboard gear and actually dial in the sounds that I want? So that's what I'm gonna explore today, and hopefully you may have some pedals lying around your studio that you're not putting to good use, and maybe this gives you some inspiration. I have no idea how this is gonna go. I've done a few tests just to see how to set everything up, and I've hit a few bumps, and I'll mention some of the things that you should be wary about or settings that you need to set up before doing this in order for it to work. But it's nothing too crazy, so I'll go ahead and tell you what gear I'm using in order to do this, and hopefully you've got the same stuff lying around your studio if you want to follow along. And yeah, here we go. First and foremost, the pedals. So I'm using the Strymon Big Sky. I always want to call it Blue Sky because of the color, but it's Big Sky. And then I've also got the Eventide TimeFactor. Two great pedals, two very powerful pedals, two expensive pedals. Too expensive to have them sitting around doing nothing. So the idea is that, you know, in a studio setting, you would have a big mixing board, you would have multiple inputs and outputs, and you would have aux channels and patch bays, and you would be able to patch all your outboard gear through that patch bay. Unfortunately, we don't have the privilege here. I don't have the privilege yet to have something like that, but I've got an Apollo Twin by Universal Audio with two inputs. Now, obviously I can't do stereo because this beautiful mic right here is being used in input 2. So I'm gonna set these up as a mono insert, right? Usually on pedals, from what I remember, and I can see this on the Eventide, is that you've got, I don't know if you can see that, probably not, it's not in focus, but when you have a stereo pedal, usually the left channel is always going to be the mono channel. So you always want to run things in mono using the left channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take output 3 for my Apollo Twin, and hopefully there'll be B-roll. Billy, if you remember to do B-roll, insert it here. So I'll be going out of output 3 of the Apollo Twin into the input left on the Big Sky, and then I'll take the left out of the Big Sky and go into the left in, which is the mono channel on the Eventide, and then that will go out of the left output into input 1 of the UAD. So that's the idea of how to set this up. Now, while testing this, I realized that there were a few settings that I needed to make in the console. Apollo Twins or Universal Audio devices come with like a virtual mixer, and there's a few settings that you need to set up in there in order to make this work properly and you don't get any weird sounds. And the way I'm thinking of testing this is in 2 separate DAWs. So I'm going to use Pro Tools for the first example, and you'll get a little glimpse of a song that will be coming out in the future. But I'll be testing out first the Big Sky, the reverb on a snare drum, and see what sounds we can get from that. And then I'll show you another song that I'm working on, which I did in Logic Pro, and we'll test out both the Strymon and the Eventide on maybe a rough vocal. It's not a perfect take, but it will do the job to kind of test this out. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook this up, and there may be a time lapse of me plugging things in. Who knows with this stuff. And once everything's set up, I'll go over to Pro Tools and I'll see how I can set all of this up and make it work. So fingers crossed, and I'll see you in a bit. Alright, so I've got everything set up, I think. Hopefully it's set up properly. But there's a few things that I came across while setting this up and trying it out before filming this video. The first thing is that you need to make sure that your cables are working. So my cables are a little bit flimsy just because they're the type of cables that you build yourself, and so you can get the different lengths that you want for your pedal board. So there may be a few tweaks here and there just to make sure that the audio is coming through properly. The second thing is that if you've got an audio interface that has multiple outputs, just make sure that the outputs that you've got are individual outputs, and I'll explain what that means. So usually your output 1 and 2 are your left and right monitor, and that basically means that anything that comes out of your DAW, or if you've got your audio interface as the default audio playback for your computer, everything will be coming out of left and right, which will be output 1 and 2. Now, in some cases, when you have multiple monitors, so for example, if you've got like 2 set of monitors, you can actually have your left and right output 1 and 2 going to one pair of monitors, and then you can have output 3 and 4, for example, going to a second pair. I don't want that. I want to make sure that the output 3 and 4 are separate from my left and right. The way you do that, if you've got an Apollo Twin or a universal audio device, you bring up console and you go to where it says Q outputs, and just make sure that line 3 and 4 are set to line 3 and 4 and not mix. The reason being is that if you've got it set to mix, it will just play through the playback. If you've got it set to line 3 and 4, you can assign a track to go out of that specific output, which is what we want in this case. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I noticed is that I needed to have my inputs muted. Otherwise, when I would play it through the DAW, when I set up the inserts, and as you'll see later on, it doubles and it gets that robotic sound. So it's probably best just to mute all your tracks. I can actually mute these ones as well because I don't need them. And that way you won't have any issues. You can just monitor through your DAW. Now that we've taken care of those settings, let's go into Pro Tools. I've got Shoulder to Your Head loaded up here. It's a song that I'm working on, hopefully one of the singles that will be coming out soon. At the moment I've got drums and bass recorded, but we're not going to worry about the bass quite yet. We're just going to focus on the snare drum. Now before we go ahead and set any tracks up, let's go to our setup. Let's go to IO. And then we want to set up a new insert path. So I'm going to go to insert, click new path. I'm going to make sure that it's one track set to mono. I can name this reverb/delay. And then hit create. And then the last thing I want to do is make sure that I've selected the output where the signal is going to come out from in my from my audio interface. In my case, it's output 3, so I'm going to select 3 and hit OK. So one of the issues I have here is that the insert path that we created is a mono signal, and my snare top and snare bottom are going through a stereo bus. So I can't put the I/O plugin that I created on the snare bus. I'm going to create a new aux channel or a new bus track. Make sure it's set to mono. I can name this reverb because we're only going to be using the reverb at the moment. Let me make sure that's disengaged as well. Hit create. I'm going to change the color. Make sure it's a nice bright blue because it's an effect. Close that. We're going to set the input to bus 1. And then make sure that the snare stereo bus that I've got is also being sent to that bus 1. So create a send, bus 1. We're going to put that all the way to 0. There we go. Now on the new aux track that I've created, I'm going to go to where I would put a plugin basically and click on one of the boxes, go to I/O, select the insert path that I created, reverb and delay. And now this should be all routed properly. So we're going to go ahead and test it out. We're going to solo the snare. I'm just going to change one little thing which has to do with my setup. You don't have to worry about this. I'm going to send this through the drums bus and save solo it. So I'm going to mute the effects for now. I'm going to listen to just the snare drum. Let's loop the solo section. And let's hear what that sounds like. Nice. I'm going to engage the reverb. I'm going to select, let's select preset B and see what that sounds like. And mute the reverb, see if it goes through the pedals. There it is. Sweet. So now that we know that's working, let's go ahead and dial in a setting. So for this situation, since it's a snare drum, I'm going to try the plate setting. We want to make sure that our mix, or if you've got a blend knob on the pedal, make sure that it's set all the way to 100% or all the way to wet, because it's set up as a bus channel. And let's listen to that. Hit play. All right, let's mess with the pre-delay. That's a bit delayed, too delayed. Let's change the decay time to 1.2, let's say. See, what does parameter 1 do? Oh, it's the low end. So we can cut some of the low end out. Let's actually do a drastic cut. And then what does parameter 2 do? Oh, you can select whether it's small or large reverb. Let's test the small sound. And then large. I think I prefer the large reverb, but let's leave it to that. And then you can adjust the tone as well on this pedal. Let's do a drastic boost. Okay, that's a bit too much. Let's roll that back. That doesn't sound bad. I mean, it's a decent sound. Obviously, we've got it all the way to 100% going through that bus channel, but let's listen to it in context. I'm gonna unsolo the snare drum. Gonna mute the reverb. That's without any reverb on the snare. With reverb. Nice, that sounds quite good actually. Now, I guess if I wanted to record that reverb effect, I would have to send my aux channel into another new audio track and then set the output of the aux channel to the input of that audio track, and then I could record the effect. It gets a little bit messy, I guess, but for a mix setting, if you're going to just print the final mix and not like bounce anything out, it's a pretty good way of going about it. Now let's try the same thing in Logic, and I've got a track loaded up here called Small Boat. It's a track that I'm working on for a community called the Noisy Brain, a great community that provides support for mental health. There's writers, poets, musicians, a whole bunch of people in that community. I highly recommend you check it out. Links will be in the description. But this track is Small Boat, and we're going to test out these pedals on some vocals. Now, the great thing with this is that the vocals is a mono signal, so I can actually add the I/O insert plugin right onto the track. So in this case, in Logic, it's super easy. All you have to do is select your track. You're going to go to where the where you'd add the plugins, click onto an empty space, click on Utility, I/O, make sure you select mono, because in this case, I've got a mono setup. Hit that. This window will pop up. Just make sure that you set the output. So select the output where your signal will be coming out of. In my case, it's output 3. And then it's coming back into input 1 technically, but because I'm doing this whole screen share recording, I've got it set to input 3, sorry. There we go. And this should be ready. I'm going to disengage the plugins for now. We're going to listen to the track without any effects. Let me unsolo the vocals. Here it is.
Let me heal my soul in water. Let the soul rub against my wound.
All right, I'm going to bring in some delay.
they're calling out my name, but I'm not near.
Let's get a nice slap delay going.
I'm not near.
16 notes, feedback, keep it quite low.
I sailed away in search of closure.
See, we've got a tape delay, so we can set the filter. Put that to some flutter. Set that to 5. Then we can get some whoa factor. Let's put that up to 8. We also have saturation.
Started to think, tried to believe. I rode and rode to a place where I could
Turn down the whoa a little bit, I can hear it.
And I focused on the here and now. I sat right back.
The great thing with this pedal is actually I can set up a second delay time, and I'm gonna choose maybe an 8th note delay. Let's do some 8th notes. There we go. There's a blend. I can blend the first and second delay, so I'm just gonna keep it in the middle for now. Set the feedback to, let's say, 15 for the 8th note delay, and maybe like 10 for the 16th note delay. So let's listen to what that sounds like.
Let me heal my soul in water.
I like that.
Let the soul rub against my wound.
Now I can hear that the level with the IO plugin is lower than the actual track is, so I'm gonna just give it a 6 dB boost within the IO plugin just to bring up the level a little bit.
Let me heal my soul in water.
Now I can turn down the wet
Let
signal.
the soul
Bring in the reverb.
my wound.
Select
And
select
I
the
hear
whole.
the waves, they're calling out my name.
So in this case, you can notice that my mix knobs are not set to 100 like we had in Pro Tools because it was on a bus channel. Now it's on the actual channel, so we want to make sure that we're blending the dry and wet signal together.
Let me heal my soul in
Turn down the
water.
pre-delay. Let's bring up the decay to
Let the
1.6.
soul rub against my wound.
Let's keep the tone.
And I hear the
Boost a little
waves, they're
bit.
calling out
Let's
my
cut some of the
name.
low end.
I'm not near.
Boost some of the mids.
I'm not near.
Kind of like that. Quite raspy.
I sailed away in search of closure.
So this is without the plugins. Or sorry, without the pedals.
I watched the waves lap at the hole.
Bring the pedals back in.
And my heart's a compass in my hands. My eyes were bright, but my mind was dull. My mind was dull.
The chorus is coming up, so we'll boost the reverb
So
and
I
delay a little
grabbed
bit.
the oars and gave a heave. Started to think, tried to believe. I rode and rode to a place where I could go. And I focused on the here and now. I sat right back, the boat did plow. I rode and rode in my small tin boat. In my small tin boat. Small boat.
Oh, it's a fun little O at the end. That's pretty neat that you can actually do all of this stuff with 2 pedals. I love the fact that I can actually perform the reverb and delay how much I want from each one. I'm sure there's other stuff I can do as well. And it just goes to show you that these effects can actually become part of the performance rather than just having to automate things and make things pop in and out, which is great when you can do it in the DAW and you've got your settings saved there. But sometimes it's nice just to kind of feel it, if that makes sense.
And that's it. That's pretty cool that you can hook these up and use them as outboard gear. I mean, I'll probably be using these a lot more and committing to some sounds rather than having the digital version of these these pedals and being able to tweak things. So there's definitely function to these. You know, other than guitar setting, you can use them in recording. You know, I'm quite excited to have these set up maybe permanently on my desk because I don't know what's gonna happen to my pedal board in the future. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have a similar situation where you got pedals lying around and you want to use them and put them to good use. Let me know if you do end up doing this, or if you've done this in the past, or if you've got any other tips or ways of setting something like this up, let me know in the comment section. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate your support. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy content like this, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, all that good stuff. It really helps me. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in the next one. And until next time, take care.